This insane IRS theory is unfolding right now. Did the Democrats accidentally confirm it? We're going to talk about that and a little bit more on top of it. So, we're going to start this out with I'm going to paint a little picture for you. Okay. Do you remember back in school, in grammar school, when you were a kid and the teacher would pass out a worksheet and you'd be like dreading it, right? Because one more thing that you've got to do. And then you pull the worksheet over and you look at it, and surprise, surprise, it's a connect the dots worksheet, and the day has been saved, because that's always the fun one, right? Well, that's kind of what we're going to do today. And I'm going to show you the worksheet that we're going to work on. You ready for this? We're going to call this worksheet "You Said Today, IRS Tomorrow." Okay, and I know I know I'm doing a little play on words here with the USAID, but it works for me. So if you guys can guess what kind of dots we're gonna put together here, I'm gonna show you at the end of this episode what the worksheet looks like. But here, we're gonna get into this. All right, so DOGE has finally dropped the axe on the last remaining 20% of USAID funds, killing the program entirely. In an interesting twist, my favorite Democrat leader, Chuck Schumer, took to the floor yesterday and proposed a plan that I am all in favor of. I'm sorry, not yesterday. I wrote that wrong in the notes. He didn't take to the floor yesterday. He took to the floor previously, and I saw the video yesterday. But why is Chuck Schumer my favorite Democrat, you may ask? Well, he always says the quiet part out loud. And here's a video of him saying this quiet part out loud. I'm going to quote this to you because we can't play audio through this. But he says, if DOGE attacks the USAID today, you can be sure they'll move on to another target tomorrow. Who knows? Maybe it'll be the Postal Service or the IRS. All right. So this video has been recirculating because DOGE is officially done for as of yesterday, I believe. So a little background on what happened with USAID first, before we get into this too much. Legacy media is mourning the loss, reporting the end of 13,000 staffers and institutional contractors' jobs as USAID closed its doors. Workers rushed to push out as much money as possible to a handful of remaining programs before clocking out in the final hour. Critics of the move had honed in on the effect this will have, claiming that millions of lives will now be lost without the aid of USAID. Many outlets are pointing to a study from The Lancet, and I'm going to pull this study up here. Am I though? Nope, I'm not going to pull that study up because I accidentally put the same tab in there twice. Anyway, you can find it in one with just a quick and simple search, The Lancet study on USAID, right? This study said that it'll save millions of lives, but if the program had continued on, it would have gone on to save over 14 million more lives, okay? George Bush, Obama, and Bono all came out yesterday grieving the passing. And here's a quote from Bono that's gone a little bit viral, where he says, "They called you crooks when you were the best of us," talking about the people behind USAID. So USAID has historically been under fire for, we probably all know by now, under fire for its extreme mismanaging of funds that have been pretty well documented at this point. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been funding questionable programs, right? Investigations show this isn't cherry picking either. It's systemic. Some examples include $20 million toward Arabic translation of Sesame Street, $10.5 million for independent media in the Balkans, $2 million for gender reassignment surgeries in Armenia, and then multiple hundreds of millions of dollars were also handed out to organizations with titles and missions so ambiguous there really is no way to know what the money was actually used for. I highly encourage everyone to go read this article that I have pulled up here, who are miscellaneous foreign awardees. This is a really well done article where he breaks down a lot of the spending that USAID was doing, and he's got links within the article that go even further to prove this point. So it's a great article. Go read it if you have a chance. And I always promise to put the links to these articles in the comment section, and I have yet to fulfill that promise. So you guys got to hold me to that a little bit more. Hopefully I'll do it this time, and I intend to do that. So maybe I'll just do it right after the stream so I don't forget. Okay, DOGE may have overestimated the total savings on its entire program, but the simple math on cutting the funding we just mentioned, plus the many millions of dollars more that are mentioned in these articles and articles like it, it shows a pretty robust savings, right? So regardless of whether or not you agree with the $1 trillion or so savings that Doge has claimed, they've still saved a lot of money. So there's something to be said for that. There's an article here that breaks down this article. How much is Elon? Okay, this one breaks down how much Doge has saved. It comes at it from a little bit of a negative angle because they aren't very happy about this, obviously. But funny enough, they still kind of prove that they're like, well, Doge didn't save $1 trillion. It only saved billions. Like, oh, okay, fine. I guess we can take billions of dollars. Anyway, shows the savings. This article says that they only saved 880 million, sorry, not billions, $1 million. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's what the article says. We'll see. Bottom line is that Doge savings are just as muddy as USAID spending is, right? So let's get to this quiet part. This is my exciting part for you guys. Okay. Back to my friend Chuck. He makes a good point, and one that I would like to bolster with some tangible evidence because he has a tendency to not do that himself. So let's prove him right. Back in January of this year, Trump posted this, right? He floated the concept of replacing the IRS with the ERS. This, of course, includes tariffs. And we have done a whole episode on tariffs. Actually, I think at least one. So if you just search our YouTube channel for tariffs, you'll find at least one video on tariffs. And we go into great detail on what they are, how they're working, and all that good stuff. So I recommend going and doing that. So I'm not going to talk too much about them here because that's a pretty obvious topic. But in addition to the tariffs generating a potential income for the U.S., companies are also moving production back to the U.S. to avoid tariffs. And despite the legacy media's spin on this, it's really happening. There are companies like Target and Kroger who are shifting to source from internal suppliers. And that's just two examples. There are many, many more examples of big chains who are shifting all of their sources, or not all, I take that back. They're shifting many of their sources over to the US. And then actual production companies, I think General Electric. Yeah, I was going to say General Motors, not General Electric just announced that they're going to move production to the States too. That was within this past week. So we've got a lot of business coming back to the States, right? So not every company is coming back to the US for production, but my argument here is that's a good thing because it just means more tariffs in our pockets. The US has the highest consumer rate in the world, quite literally. This is not an exaggeration. If you look at this number down here, you can see my mouse. Okay, so we got US number one coming in at $18.8 trillion. So here's how this works, right? We have foreign companies who are still going to do business with the USA because it would be remiss of them to just be like, you know what, we're not going to do business with the USA because of the tariffs, because clearly we're the front runner of spending money on all of their stuff. I can't imagine Temu just shutting down because, oh, the tariffs, they're just going to figure it out. This is a massive amount of money that people would be missing out on if they decided not to do business with the US, okay? I've got a point to all this. This is building up to, like I said, remember, we're connecting the dots, okay? We're getting this picture put together slowly, one piece at a time. So some may not agree, but when President Trump says something is going to happen, he generally makes it happen one way or another. It might not look like what we thought it was going to look like, but in some way, it ends up happening. He didn't explicitly state that the IRS will be replaced with the ERS in the Truth Post, this one right here. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and read this for you guys because it does look kind of small on my screen, just in case you don't remember it. For far too long, we have relied on taxing our great people using the Internal Revenue Service, through soft and pathetically weak trade agreements, the American economy has delivered growth and prosperity to the world while taxing ourselves. It's time for that to change. I am today announcing that I will create the External Revenue Service. So that's a promise that Trump made, right? I did not set myself up well on this because I put that way too far away to be able to read it. Anyway, moving on. He said he's going to create the ERS. I believe him. Let's see how that works out or how that could potentially work out. So no more taxing the people of the US. That's what he wants. He clearly stated no more taxing the people of the U.S. And he even said in a Fox interview in April that there's a chance that the tariffs can replace the income tax. The IRS has already been hit hard since President Trump took office. Nearly 18,000 IRS employees have accepted buyouts under the resignation program. The budget proposal is aiming for a 20% reduction for the IRS on top of a 30% cut already enacted. Aaron Collins, a national taxpayer advocate, said, with the IRS workforce reduced by 26% and significant tax law changes on the horizon, there are risks to next year's filing season. It is critical that the IRS begin to take steps now to prepare. So she is already warning the IRS, the government, and the American people that next year, by 2026, we're going to have problems with the IRS. Something has to be done in the meantime in order to make this work efficiently. So we've got some issues. Revenue will come from external sources. President Trump is a big fan of like a pay-to-play type of concept. He loves doing that. For example, we talked at length about the golden ticket in another episode where foreigners can get a type of fast pass to the US, but they would pay money for it, okay? So that's a pay-to-play kind of thing. The point is, there's just more than one way to generate revenue for the country, and is not just restricted to tariffs. So there's the argument that tariffs wouldn't make up nearly enough money to replace the income tax, but it's not only tariffs that we're talking about here. Trump's got a lot of other things in play, and we're going to talk about more of those here in a second. But here's the kicker. It's not possible to create a new government arm like the ERS without congressional approval, right? So here's my argument. He's not going to do that. He's simply going to transform the IRS from the inside out. And it's going to take a while. It will not be overnight. And here's how I think that's going to break down how this is going to work. And this is like a symphony coming together. I can see it. I hope you guys can join me on this thought process here. Okay, so first, enter Billy Long, who is the new commissioner of the IRS. Once again, another topic we already talked about in a recent video a little bit more at length. So I'm not going to get into much details, but here's a quick bullet list of what Billy Long, what his history is, okay? He sponsored legislation that proposed abolishing the IRS. He's advocated for a flat tax, a common IRS replacement ideology. He's promoted tax credits that undermined IRS enforcement efforts. And he's regularly criticized the IRS, making statements that suggest it needs an overhaul. So we've got this guy, Billy Long, heading up the IRS, who clearly doesn't like the IRS, and he's making the big decisions for it. Whether or not you like him and whether or not you agree with his tactics, one thing I have learned about Trump is that he doesn't hire a person because he likes them or because he thinks people are going to like them. He hires a person because he thinks they're going to do the job the way he wants the job done. And that's what Billy Long is probably going to do. So the big, beautiful bill is the next part of this whole puzzle. It is just the start with these tax break programs. So it has repealed the Biden era 1099-K requirement to report third-party payment platforms like Venmo and PayPal for anything over $600. That threshold increased to $20,000 and 200 transactions before needing to report to the IRS. That's a whole side gig business that can be essentially tax-free depending on your tax standard of ethics, right? So, of course, I would recommend you pay your taxes on anything that you're supposed to pay your taxes on, because you don't want to get into trouble. And also, nothing here that I say is financial advice. So don't take this in any way or another. I'm just pointing out the facts, and I'll let you guys come to your own conclusion on what they mean to you. Okay. So in addition to that, we have no taxes on tips and overtime. Incentives for tax deductions up to $10,000 on domestically produced vehicles. So you can buy a vehicle and potentially get a tax deduction up to $10,000 on that vehicle as long as it was produced here in the States. If this bill passes, right? This is all contingent. Senior citizens below a certain threshold can receive a $6,000 reduction. Increased child tax credit. It was only $200 per child, so it went from $2,000 to $2,200, but still, I mean, that's more money in your pocket, right? And then overall, we have about a $4.5 trillion tax cut that is promised with this bill. Okay, and these if the bill passes, this is also permanent. These are not, many of these are permanent. This is not a temporary thing that's going to go away eventually. Here's a bonus thought for you guys. We have also this tax gap. This is a huge issue. I knew this was a thing, but I didn't realize actually how big this was until I did the research on it this morning. There is already a massive mishandling of taxes for years now. Unpaid taxes are higher than you might think, ranging around $668 billion as of 2021. Now, they have implemented strategies and such to try to curtail that, but they haven't really worked that well. Combine that with an archaic collection system that literally dates back to the 1960s and the massive budget cuts and layoffs, and you've got a really big problem in the IRS, one that can't just be addressed overnight. So what is the problem? The problem that people point out with losing income tax is typically, this is the biggest argument that I hear. What about the government funding things like paving roads? That's the common reaction, right? Well, here's a list of how we can avoid that problem and actually make money as a country. We've already covered the tariffs, so I'm not going to go over that. Savings, we covered that with DOGE, and also the big beautiful bill has a lot of savings in that too, billions of dollars of savings and spending. Although it is true that that bill is going to then make us spend billions of dollars on other things, but a lot of those ultimately end up in saving. Okay, here's my next point that I want to make. A booming economy. I'm a huge proponent of getting the government's hands out of what should be the private sector, which I believe should be dang near everything. There's only a handful of things that the government should be doing. Most of it needs to be privatized, in my opinion. Privatization creates competition, which propels the economy. And that's simple math. More money in the people's pockets means more money flowing through society. We all win. Rising tide lifts all boats, right? The federal government is implementing what once was called crazy and quote unquote never going to happen in many people's eyes. And that is our next point, which is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. A year ago, did you even think that we would be having our government trying to put together a Bitcoin reserve? This is really more of a crazy idea than you think, but it's just another way to prop up the economy and actually cause it to do even better. And it's a pretty clever strategy, I think, anyway. What starts as a truth post from Trump talking about this Bitcoin reserve, what was this back in? I can't see that date, but it was a few months ago, right? It inevitably ends up as an official declaration on the White House page. Okay, it's crazy how he says something and it really does tend to happen. Like I said, maybe not the way you think it should, but it does. This is important because crypto is becoming less and less risky by the day and more lucrative. And only a few years ago, Bitcoin was a joke, and now it remains well above $100,000 per coin. This means the federal government is actually investing money rather than spending it for once. And no one invests money to just sit there and watch it grow and then never do anything with it. It will get used for something. Because what will happen is the Bitcoin and whatever other digital assets they put in the strategic reserve will then get more valuable, and you can apply the regular trading tactic of scraping some of that off the top to use it for whatever you want. And think about the kind of massive amount of money that the federal government can do that with once Bitcoin goes crazy, right? And you thought Bitcoin was crazy. Now and once some of these things happen with the reserve, something else is gonna take place. I can't I'm being really careful. I have my opinions on what is exactly gonna happen with crypto, but I'm being very careful because I don't want to mislead anybody. Don't ever invest in anything without doing your own research first and being confident of what it is you're doing with your money. I'll just say that. But anyway, moving on. So we're poised for more than just a backup plan. I personally believe that this could be actually part of the plan. Let's not forget the billions of dollars that President Trump has negotiated from investors into the U.S. economy. SoftBank committed about $500 billion to the states. The deal with Qatar for over $1 trillion economic exchange. These are just examples of the kinds of strategies that could indirectly replace the need for income tax. And it's only July. Trump just started this in January. We've got another 3+ years of these kinds of things happening. So here's the big thing that one of the big things that people are concerned about with the big beautiful bill, which, by the way, we're going to talk more about that tomorrow. I'm just giving you a little taste of what is to come, because we're going to really dive deep into the new tax bill. So this is just a highlight from my perspective of what I think so far, but we're going to get a lot more into it because there's so much more to be had on that discussion. The tax cap is increasing, okay? But here's my argument for that. I'm not a fan of that. First of all, I will say I don't like that idea, but I do believe that there's a strategy happening behind the scenes here that I don't fully understand, and that most Americans don't fully understand either. Politicians shouldn't be in charge of money anyway, because that's a conflict of interest. They naturally want more money flowing to DC because that's where their paycheck comes from. President Trump doesn't need the money. He never has, and he probably never will, because he is already rich, right? He knows how to save money, and more importantly, he knows how to make money. And I've got a really interesting example for you guys. I recently applied for a credit card, and I have been kind of more on this, like using debt to like make money off of your debt, right? I've been looking into that, like rich dad, poor dad kind of idea. And I like the concept of it, but you have to be careful about how you do it. So I applied for a credit card. I got the credit card. It was a decent max limit, right? And I started using the credit card with full intention of never maxing it out, and I am not going to do that. The rewards that I got from that credit card for this last cycle paid for an entire day of grocery shopping, which when we go grocery shopping, we do it big. Paid for it. That, I think, is the basic concept behind what's happening with this big beautiful bill. Is yes, the limit is increased, so the ceiling is up high. We want to get it down below and use that debt to our advantage to put more money in our pocket. So just because you have a debt ceiling doesn't mean you have the debt. In the past, it has. I agree with that. Every time we raise the debt ceiling, we meet the debt ceiling. That is definitely a thing. And I don't like that, but we don't have to. And so I am hopeful that what's going to happen is we're going to not meet the debt ceiling. We're going to utilize that debt to make us money, and we're going to become a more economically stable country because of it. And it takes people who are not politicians to make that happen, because politicians, like I said, have a conflict of interest. They're not interested in saving money for the country, as far as I can tell. They're interested in getting money in their pockets. So if we can get people in there who are actually economically smart and who are not just in it for the politics and who are managing this money well, that's a different story. So I'm curious to see how far that is going to be taken. My final point on this. This is why this is the theory. I led you off with this. This is a big IRS theory, okay? This all sounds probably dreamy, right? But what I'm getting at is this is called conditioning. With all these points that I just made leading up to where we're at now, which is not a final destination, we're still on this journey, we are being conditioned to accept a reduced tax burden on the people. For those people who are worried about the income tax going away and what are we going to do with the roads? What are we going to do with the schools? How are we going to fund these kinds of things? There is a plan in place where money will be able to come in for those things, and it's based on the previous points that I just made. But what we need is to have that mindset switched over to making money rather than worried about spending money. Okay? We are being conditioned to accept a lower income tax or no income tax, which is my hope. President Trump, on his side efforts by President Trump and those on his side, well, I read that real weird. We are slowly acclimating to a different economic landscape. I think cryptocurrency is the best example of this, because it was once a joke and impractical, truly, because you couldn't use it for anything. And now it's being used by banks. It is being approved by federal regulated organizations, we'll just say. It is becoming more and more common. You can get into crypto right now if you want to, and you can even start using it under certain circumstances. It will replace regular fiat money at some point. I can almost guarantee it. So it is accurate to suggest that it would be crazy to just cut off the IRS immediately. I don't think we should do that. That's a bad idea. But if you follow these steps, you can see how all of this culminates into one final end, which is potentially no more income tax. Okay. Projected into the future of the rest of Trump's term, which, like I said, remember 3+ years of whatever it is he's planning, and we've already come this far. Is it really all that shocking to imagine the IRS piddling away into nothing? I don't think so, personally. You'll get used to no taxes. It will come. You'll warm up to it. You'll get used to no taxes in overtime. Let's paint this picture. Overtime. You don't have to do taxes anymore. If the big, beautiful bill passes, you don't have to pay taxes on overtime. That's part of the bill. Unless they remove it before it gets to Trump's desk, that's part of the bill. Okay. The next step, theoretically, now we're just painting a picture here. Remember, the next step might be no taxes for those who work full time, right? To encourage full time work. Then that would encourage more full time work, which would boost the economy, which is another incentive to get more money into the country, right? Then you'll get used to no taxes on full time. You'll get acclimated to that. And then maybe certain essential jobs will qualify for no income tax. And then you'll get used to that. I'm just trying to say, step by step, we are walking pretty solidly toward the IRS no longer being the watchdog over our shoulders, taking money out of our pockets and putting it wherever they're putting it. And who knows? And it might be a thing of the past. So in the meantime, more money pours into the country from other sources. Government companies are privatized. Capitalism starts to work the way it was always meant to work. And we end up where we started when we didn't need income tax. That is my vision of the future. And I hope that all these politicians and Trump and everybody on his team are working us toward that end goal. That is what I would like to see happen. Maybe we go back on the gold standard. I don't know. Maybe we switch entirely to digital assets. That's what I think is going to happen. And those are only going up in value. Who knows? But either way, this is conditioning. And here's a fun last concept for you guys on the flip side of this conditioning conversation. People like Chuck Schumer have already warned us. Why would he point out the IRS specifically? He may be dramatic or emotional, but I don't think he is unintentional. He meant what he said. And he did because I think he's trying to point these things out so that when they happen, he can point back to them and say, see, I told you, I was right. Now, that is my whole angle. That's what I see happening. And that's pretty much all I got for you guys. But what I do want to say at the end of this is my opinions and my thoughts on this do not necessarily reflect those of the rest of the team here at Filibusted. And I also don't want to influence people to the point where they are making bad financial decisions. So take this for what it is. This is just a theory, but I just can't help but connect the dots and see that hopefully by the end of all this, this worksheet that we just put together looks a little something like this. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe not Bitcoin, but I just found a random picture of Trump with money. So I thought that was fun. Anyway, time will tell. And hopefully maybe in a year from now, we can come back to this video and say, oh, you know what? He was onto something. That'd be pretty cool. If not, you know what? Life goes on and we'll still just keep paying taxes, I guess. What is it? The old saying there, nothing is inevitable except for death and taxes, or death and taxes is inevitable. I don't know, something like that. My brain is fried from putting all this together for you guys. So anyway, we're going to be going live at 9:30 tomorrow. I know we've been doing a lot of afternoon stuff for these smaller segments, but tomorrow, still 9:30 in the morning, it's going to be all four of us on, and we're going to be talking more about the tax bill and another couple angles on that. And we're going to get into the weeds. So I hope you guys will join us. And well, I suppose I'll see you there.